Okay, I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine a single continuous meeting. Now imagine that meeting lasting for an entire century. And I'm not speaking in metaphors here. I mean a literal, unbroken gathering happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for over 100 years. It's just a totally staggering concept, right? And, it naturally leads us to a really fascinating question. How exactly did an 18th century German aristocrat, a guy born into immense wealth and extreme privilege, abandon that comfortable life to ignite this extraordinary worldwide phenomenon?
Well, let's dive right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are going to unpack the absolutely remarkable life and legacy of Count Nicolaus Ludwig von Zinzendorf. We're going to explore how his radical decisions not only revived a struggling community, but literally reshaped the entire landscape of global missions.
Part 1. An unlikely historical catalyst.
So, to understand this movement, we first kind of have to understand the man. Born in Dresden back in 1700 into immense wealth, Zinzendorf was raised by his deeply devout grandmother. Fast forward to his young adult years, and we see this sheer night-and-day contrast between the life society expected of him and the life he actually chose. Despite getting an elite education that prepped him for a high-powered government career, he felt a completely different pull. Instead of chasing political power, he chose a radical path of homely service, hosting refugees, and focusing almost entirely on global evangelism.
Moving into Section 2, the miracle at Herrnhut. That radical choice to host refugees brings us right into a tense historical crucible. In 1722, Zinzendorf opened up his personal estate to a group of persecuted Protestant refugees who were fleeing Bohemia and Moravia. They settled there, and the community became known as Herrnhut, which translates to the Lord's Watch. But look, as you can probably imagine, bringing together people from various Christian backgrounds who had literally just fled trauma, well, it didn't immediately result in a perfect utopia. In fact, early disagreements and really intense theological friction threatened to tear this brand new settlement apart from the inside out.
Following their arrival in 1722 and through those really fragile early years, Zinzendorf didn't just use his aristocratic power to force everyone to get along. Instead, he patiently guided the community toward reconciliation. He constantly emphasized love, humility, and forgiveness over their denominational differences. And all that patient leadership culminated a few years later, specifically on August 13, 1727, during a communion service at the local Berthelsdorf church.
So what actually happened at that service is crucial. It wasn't just a polite resolution to their arguments. It was an explosive spiritual renewal known today as the Moravian revival. The believers experienced this deep, sweeping repentance. Their love for Christ was totally renewed. All that earlier division was replaced by incredible unity and this profound joy in worship. And maybe most importantly, it birthed a burning passion for missions. A lot of historians actually look back at this exact moment as one of the greatest spiritual awakenings in Protestant history.
Which brings us to part 3, 100 years praying.
That intense spiritual awakening didn't just fade away after the weekend. Right after the revival, the members of the Herrnhut community organized an hourly prayer watch. They quite literally scheduled themselves so that someone was actively praying every single hour of every single day. And this unbroken chain of prayer didn't just last a month or a year, it continued for more than 100 years. It became the absolute beating heart of everything they did next.
Let's look at Section 4, a global missionary vision.
Fueled by all that ceaseless prayer, Zinzendorf deeply believed that every single Christian had a role to play in the Great Commission. He didn't think spreading the gospel was just for a select few professionals. So, beginning in 1732, they launched a massive global push. Guys, we are talking about the early 1700s, yet they were sending missionaries to Greenland, Suriname, South Africa, Jamaica, the United States, and Canada. The Moravians were intentionally going to places where very few Europeans had ever even attempted long-term Christian ministry.
And it wasn't just where they went. It was how they lived when they got there. Their whole methodology was defined by radical humility. These missionaries didn't set up comfortable little European enclaves. No, they lived directly among enslaved people, indigenous communities, and the poor. They learned the local languages. They worked alongside the people they were trying to reach. The sources even note a famous, though, historically debated story that some Moravians were actually willing to sell themselves into slavery just to reach enslaved people. Whether that's literal or not, what is undeniably documented is their extraordinary, unmatched willingness to endure intense hardship and sacrifice just to share the gospel.
All right, Part 5, the Zinzendorf Legacy.
Zinzendorf himself continued to shape this movement for decades, even being consecrated as a bishop of the Moravian Church in 1737. But he wasn't just an administrator or a theologian, right? He was an incredibly prolific creative force. Get this, Zinzendorf wrote more than 2,000 hymns. Through his music, he basically taught the Moravian theology, emphasizing the love of Christ, the cross, Christian fellowship, and the sheer joy found in salvation. His hymns were a critical tool for uniting his community and keeping their mission focused.
His influence also rippled out in ways he literally couldn't have predicted, specifically touching another massive historical figure, John Wesley. In 1735, Wesley was on a ship traveling to America when a violent storm broke out. While everyone else was panicking, Wesley observed a group of Moravian Christians who remained entirely calm, just singing hymns in the face of death. Their unwavering faith deeply impacted Wesley. It challenged him, completely shifted his own spiritual journey, and indirectly played a massive role in the subsequent rise of the Methodist movement. And it all stems from the spiritual DNA Zinzendorf helped cultivate.
Count Zinzendorf died in Herrnhut on May 9, 1760, at the age of 59. By the time of his death, he had revived the Moravian Church, established the thriving community of Herrnhut, sparked a 100-year prayer chain, and promoted unity across Christian denominations. Furthermore, his vision really paved the way for the modern Protestant missionary movement, inspiring later giants like William Carey and Adoniram Judson. He absolutely proved that a life totally surrendered to a cause can literally change the globe, regardless of your wealth or social status.
And I want to leave you with this final thought, a quote that's closely associated with Zinzendorf himself. He said, "Preach the gospel, die, and be forgotten." It is such a stunning paradox. He achieved lasting, monumental, global impact precisely through absolute humility and a total willingness to be erased from the story so long as the message moved forward. So what should we take away from this explainer today? Well, I think it leaves us with a really powerful, provocative question. What kind of lasting impact could we achieve today if we cared a little less about being remembered and a lot more about the work we leave behind?